Oh, go ahead.
Well, this summer once my cousin Edwin Miller, he comes from Texas, and his wife died last winter. Some very unusual disease she had. It was in her muscles, Her muscles were aching just all over her body. It was terribly painful. Well, anyway, when she passed away, now this summer he came out here to visit all his cousins that were still. He came through South Dakota, came to our place, to Ben's and to Herman's, and every place he went, he had a videotape like this.
Oh, really?
And he took pictures all the way of everyone he could meet. And then he went all the way out to Chehalis, Washington, to where our only uncle lives yet. When he came out there, he had the whole relation, all his cousins from South Dakota all the way out to Washington, and he showed them to Uncle Dan. He said that was just like visiting with all you guys.
Neat.
We had to walk around out in the garden, and we talked to him all the time what we were doing, and he was continually taking pictures of us.
That's what's fun with these, and they're cheap to run. Okay. Is there kind of a glare?
Or you have to pull the drape?
No, I think
that's
it's
on
okay.
the TV.
That's on the TV, yeah. Okay, what's the date today? November 8th, 1985?
9.
9th. November 9th, 1985. We have Adam and Mary Hoffman here today. Should we ask your age, or is that not relevant?
You can do anything. I'll even answer that.
Okay. What are your ages? Can you tell us?
Well,
Mary, don't go.
I was born in May 26th, 1899.
Wow.
And that would make me about
86.
39.
And you, Mary?
Well, I'm never ashamed to tell how old I am. I'm glad I reached that age. I was born in 1907, June 24, and on my last birthday I was 78.
For you.
I hate to think of it that I'll soon be 80 years old. I hope I'll be still active.
Yeah, but look at your young husband. He's in his 80s and he hasn't changed.
Well, I take good care of him. That's why I look at him. I don't make him work. I make him take a nap every day.
Really?
Just kind of watch over him because I want him to be around for a while.
I wanted to chop some wood we have a coal furnace in the house. And I was out chopping wood and she come out and stopped me.
I said, you shouldn't be doing that. You know what happened to Walter Worth? He was out there chopping wood. And his brother-in-law said, well, I think that's enough for today. And Walter said, no, I'm just going to keep on a little bit. And the other one went home. Pretty soon a neighbor come by there. There Walter was lying by the wood pile, was dead.
How old was he?
He could be probably 72 or 73. It's around that area. I don't know for sure now.
Wasn't very old. Okay, I want we have you tell, either one of you, if you have any stories, or Dad join in.
I have a question.
Okay.
In 1928, it seems like everybody bought a new car. Was it a big harvest that year, or what?
1928 was one of the biggest harvests we've had for a long time. 1928 was a bumper year for farmers.
What would a bumper year? How many bushels an
Well,
acre?
compared to now, if you have 40 bushel of wheat now to the acre, and you would have 25, that would have been especially high. 18 and 20 was average in that year.
What did they get for a bushel of wheat?
$1.10 maybe something
even.
like that. $1.20.
Maybe not even that much.
In let's see, what year was that? 1930, we got 17 cents for a bushel of rye.
In what year did you first come to this area?
I came to the Streeter area in October 1926.
As a teacher, or for what reason?
As a school teacher, to teach church school here in the Father Miller's old home.
Where was that located?
Was that German?
There's a big tree there yet, right?
Is it by the cemetery, by the root cellar?
It's on the south side of the cemetery. Is there a cement?
Yeah.
Yes.
That was on the northeast corner of the house. That, they said in German, Kellerhals.
Yeah. Throw in all the German you can.
Was the German? Was the school German? Was the school German?
No, that was English.
Was it right in Grandpa's house? Great-Grandpa's?
Right in the front room. The front room was on the east side, and then there was a room in between, and then there was and then the living room I think was, I wouldn't doubt but what it was, maybe the bedroom where we were in, because the bigger room was on the west end, and they had about 100 bushels of grain in there.
In the house?
Well, that was the other part of the house. It had nothing to do with our school.
Was that a church school or
That was church school. That
only Adventists attended then?
Yes, there was from Adventist parents. There were no others there. You see, there was Joe Kaiser, Henry Kaiser, Jake Kaiser, and what was the oldest girl's name?
Frieda and
Martha.
Martha, yeah, Martha. And of course they came to the Streeter Church, and then there was Emmanuel Miller, Martha Miller, Tabitha, and Ruth. And then there was Irene and Clarence Horst. And from here was Reinhold, Lydia, and Harold that came to
That
school.
first year.
Ellen didn't go then yet. She was too young.
And was that Grandpa Miller or my great-grandpa? That was your dad.
Yeah, that was
John.
Yeah, that was Grandpa Miller.
Now, who
I
paid
never
you?
got to know. I never got to know your great grandpa.
They were already dead at that
Yeah.
time?
See, I came here in 26, and I heard he died in 15.
Great-grandpa
Yeah.
Miller. And great-grandma Miller?
John Miller's. Gina's dad's.
Did you ever
father.
know our great-grandma that was supposed to have sat on 3 chairs or whatever?
2 chairs.
Well, that was your grandpa's mother.
Yeah.
Oh yes, I knew
She was
her.
a large
I
lady,
knew her real
apparently.
well, and I remember when she used to come to the Streeter Church.
Oh, did she come?
Oh,
I thought
she
was
came
a
to
Polish.
church. Oh yes.
Did she
came.
join the church ever?
Oh yes.
Yes, she was
yes.
baptized.
She was very strict evangelical. Nobody dared to farm on her land on Sunday. That was absolutely. Then when she joined the Adventist church, no one worked on Sabbath on her land.
Mm-hmm.
There
I
was
can-
even some of her sons that would have liked to work. The Christ even wanted to work on her land on Sabbath, but she didn't allow it. And when I came to work for John Miller here, that is Jehu's
Grandpa.
dad, in 1928, I hired out for a 1 whole month to work for them here.
For harvest or what?
Harvest time. I run the binder and I shocked and I did everything. And she had a little house here where she lived in. It was not connected with their home. And so one day John came to me and he says, "You knew my mother." I said, "Yes, I knew her mother." He says, "Why, she's pretty sick over there. You and I will go over and talk to her a little bit." And then we walked over to her house, and she was sitting in bed. And she says, "And you've been here now almost a month, and you haven't come over to talk to her, see me." She gave me a little reprimand. I felt bad about it because I figured she was sick, and I didn't want to disturb her anyway because I was out in the field every day and working. Mm-hmm. We had no rainy spell or anything. It was a whole month of work every day, and so.
Did she die?
Yeah, she died during that time. The funeral was during the time I was here.
What was her personality? Was it like Dad's mom, like Rosina's?
No, she
'Cause
was
she-
more outspoken. Very
Was she
much
pretty?
more.
That's kind of the
Yeah,
impression I got.
very, very outspoken. That's Jehu's mother would never
She was
reprimand
quiet,
me.
yeah.
Wouldn't reprimanded me like that. She looked straight at me and she said, "You've been here now almost a month," and I didn't think she would even think about
Think about
me.
it, huh?
Yeah, being a-
But how many years was she an Adventist then? A lot, or just toward the end? Was
I wouldn't know. This was I came here in 26, and she died in 28, and she was a member of the church before 26.
Did great-grandpa ever join? Her husband?
I do not know.
Or was he
I was
opposed?
curious to know what she died of.
What did she die of? Do you know her?
What's old age?
Who
I
knew
think
in
I
those
don't
days?
know what they then.
Did Grandpa ever? Great-grandpa? Was he ever an Adventist?
Well,
Her husband.
the way I got the story, she was so strict against Adventists that she didn't allow him to go to church.
You mean Grandpa or great-grandpa?
Her husband, yeah.
So he'd take the buggy and he'd go west of the farm south, and she was thinking he'd go to Napoleon shopping, and he'd sneak over to the church. Towards evening, he'd come home, and she did not allow him to be baptized. And he passed away before he was baptized.
But he was pro-Adventist.
Yes, he had full intentions of joining the church.
Wasn't there times that they were terribly opposed to it when Grandpa became an
Oh,
Adventist?
she was terribly opposed.
Yeah, she was.
That's what.
Was,
What brought about the change of heart then?
yeah, does anybody know that?
She read the Bible, and she read a certain text. Who knows that text? Do you remember, honey?
Well, she
Turning that foot against
turned
the
that
Sabbath.
foot from the Sabbath and seek their own pleasure. She read the text over and over, and
Took the
it
Bible
finally
out.
dawned on her she was wrong.
What would that text be in German? Does anybody know?
It's Isaiah.
I mean, but how would you say it in German?
How does it go in English?
Turn
Turn
not
not thy
from
foot
the
from the
Sabbath,
Sabbath.
from doing
Thy
thine own
foot
good
from Sabbath.
pleasure.
I just can't say it now in German. But I remember the first Sabbath when she came to church after she was baptized.
Now, you were a member here
Oh,
at
yes,
that
all
time.
my life. I was going to the street of church, and I can, if it would be in the old church, I could still point her out where she was sitting, and her face just shone just like an angel.
Really?
She was so happy.
And you were quite surprised to see
Yeah.
this woman
Yeah.
change. Yeah. And then Grandpa, so then you came to Grandpa's house to teach in this year. This was my grandpa, John. And they were terribly poor, or was that before the Depression
Well,
had really set in?
it was just before the depression, but I got depression wages.
What did you get paid?
I got $40 a month, and out of that I paid $10 for board and room.
Just paid $10.
I couldn't afford to drive my car. I
You could
had
always
it
spend that
parked
for a meal.
on blocks. I didn't drive my car during the
So
winter.
you lived on $30 a month?
Oh yes, yeah, and I saved money.
And that was tithe and offering and
Oh yeah, that
everything
was
else?
taken out of that.
Uh-huh.
I saved money and put it in the Streeter Bank. And in 1929, the Streeter Bank closed, and I lost it all.
It closed?
Yeah.
You lost all your money?
Yeah, your grandpa
That's something.
came at he was kind of cute in saying things. He says, I'm going to give you a riddle tonight, like Samson said when he ate some of that honey out of that lion carcass. And he said, one man in Streeter pulled down the curtains, and the whole city was in uproar. And I said, bank closed. At supper.
You didn't think that was real funny, right?
No, I didn't think so. But I had told him that day when he went to town
Uh-huh.
to take my money out. I had given him a piece of paper and wrote on there that he could give it to the
You
bank.
mean Grandpa?
And, yeah, and he should withdraw my money on Friday. And he went to town then on Monday, and the bank was closed.
Well, didn't the banker say that the bank was in such good condition? It's never been that good.
Yeah, well, he told that too.
That was right before the stock market crashed, or what?
Yeah, it was in that.
Yeah. What was Grandpa? They said, I've heard reports that he was 6 feet tall, and then other people said, nah, he wasn't that tall. And was he a tall?
I think he was 6 feet tall. I think so, because he was taller than I. I was just 2 inches short at that time. Now I'd be 4 inches short.
Was he muscular or
No,
lanky, skinny, or
No, he was very, very lanky.
kind of like Kimber Hoffman built, sort of?
Something like,
Uh-huh.
maybe not quite as skinny as that, but he was not broad-shouldered like.
Was he witty, or quiet, or outspoken, or what was his personality like? Like Grandma was quiet. Was he sort of like that too?
Which one of his kids would you say was most like?
He was a very sociable man, I would say. As far as outspoken, I couldn't really characterize him that way.
Uh-huh.
But he was very sociable, because I came to Fred Flemmer's on the 5th of October in the evening, and he and his wife, that was Jade's mother, they came over to see the new teacher over there, and we got acquainted before school started the next day. and he was very sociable. That's really the first time that I had ever met him that I remember. So my impression was that he was a very sociable man, and always found him that way.
Did he enjoy jokes and things, or was he more serious? Because was he like Uncle Reinhold? Uncle Reinhold always kind of seemed to smile easily.
Oh, he would enjoy a joke, but I never remembered him telling one that I could think of now.
He wasn't that type, really, to always be cracking jokes. Yeah.
His brother Chris, he was always telling jokes, as far as I know, but I don't remember. John was more serious than that.
Did he love farming, or did you get the impression he would have liked to have done something else?
That I would not know if he enjoyed farming or not. That I couldn't make up a mind on that.
Yeah. Mom says the questions are getting harder. Tell us about that school a little bit. Was that like your first year teaching, or had you taught before?
That was my first year teaching.
Were you nervous?
And I had not even prepared for teaching. I had prepared for theology. I was going to be a preacher. But I went to college 3 years.
At Union or where?
No, at Hutchinson Theological Seminary. And when school was out, the third year, I was in debt. And I made up my mind I was going to earn some money before I'd go to school again. I wasn't going to have a big debt hanging over me. So I had made up my mind that I had a good year in thrashing that fall. I had done some thrashing. And here I got a letter from the educational superintendent of the conference. And we had been pals for years. This educational superintendent was Harry Wintland. And this Harry Wintland, he writes me a letter in September or August in there. Adam, I want you to teach church school at Streeter this fall. And of course, I had gone to Hutchinson to school, and they had a very good normal department there where they were teaching teachers how to teach. And I steered clear of that. I didn't go to that school. I went to theology. I signed up for a theology ministerial course. And I right the next mail, I wrote back to Jamestown to the conference. I says, Harry, I didn't prepare to teach, and I'm not going to teach. I don't want. That's final. I sent that letter away, and when he got my letter, I think he did the same thing. He sat down, and this is final. You're going to teach at Streeter, and you're going to board with Fred Flemmers, and I've written to the North Dakota, the Northern Union Conference, and they're sending you a teaching certificate, and you're going to start Monday morning, October the 6th.
And Adam, you know what 2 and 2 is. If you can add 2 and 2, you can teach.
Is that what he said?
That's, you had it in the letter.
There's your certificate, huh?
And when I had a teaching certificate and a place to board. And then I just felt, then I maybe have to go, because if that's all cut and dried, then I'd be terrible if I'd break all those contracts, So that's how I started.
Was this Mr. Wentland, was he a pastor, or he was?
Well, did you know Rankin?
Who?
Rankin Wentland?
He's from the West, isn't he? Or no?
See, Rankin's son was he was a pastor up in Oregon and Washington.
I graduated from college with a Wentland whose dad was a physician.
No.
He was a
It
doctor.
must be a different Wentland.
Honey, these were around Milton Freewater,
Because
weren't
there are
they?
no
Those Wentlands?
doctors in the family that I know of.
Who's the Wentland? Cleo Wentland? No,
Or maybe
not Cleo.
maybe he was a pastor. I don't know. Seemed to me like his dad was a doctor.
Mom, who's the one by Patty Gruzy? That Patty.
I think you're on the right track. But his dad, he's living in Deer Lodge, Tennessee, and he was the first missionary to Vietnam. And then
Yeah.
He
That's right.
came back. He had two boys, Rankin and Roger. And then he came back. He had two. What do you call it? Two hitches to
Two turns.
Saigon in Vietnam. And then he came back to the United States, and he was in the Southern Union. And then they sent him to Africa for a few years.
Yeah, this guy grew up in Africa. This kid did. Spent some time with his folks.
Yeah. Well, that's
one of his
I think. But he got killed in an accident. This
father?
young Rankin
Yeah.
that you graduated
He
with.
did?
He got killed going from Deer Lodge, Tennessee. He was going up to visit her folks in Michigan, and on the trip they had a car accident or a head-on collision, and he got killed. This Rankin Jr. Well, this Rankin, the father to this boy that you're talking about, he and I, we graduated in the same class in SRA.
Oh.
But then there was one of the grandsons of this Wendland. He just graduated from the medical school last spring in June.
That could have been the
That's
one
the
you
guy
got.
I know. The guy I know went on to medical school.
See, we just happened to be in Loma Linda yet when they had this,
Yeah.
and Rankin and his wife came out for this grandson's graduation
Loma Linda, yeah.
in Loma Linda.
Yeah, the guy I know went on down to Loma Linda to medical school.
Yeah.
So then when you came to this school, you had all 8 grades or not?
No, well, I think I had pretty near all of them. I
Uh-huh.
don't remember which one was missing, but you see there was no 8th graders. You see there was Clarence and Reinhold and Lydia. They were in the same class. I think they were 6th or 7th graders. See, they were the oldest ones.
Where did they go before you came? To Bender School? Or public
Well,
school?
there was a church school here before. A man by the name of Jacob Peters had church school here several years, and they went to that church school there. Then after I left, church school closed. Then they went to this Bender school.
Oh, that was after you left. Did
Tell
they,
a little about Clarence's high heels.
Yeah, well, that's.
yeah, go ahead. Anything
Well, he's
humorous.
got a lot of funny things.
Go ahead, just throw them in here. We got lots of tapes.
Well, when you go to school, you have disciplinary problems. Have you ever talked?
Even then?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, we had this, but they were not
Not
difficult
severe.
Yeah, I've taught
problems. Well, Reinhold had one of the first ones. He gave me problems. That was your brother, and he'd slide down in his seat, have a big geography book up there, and he could wiggle his ears, and that brought the whole church school in uproar in school time. And now, how would you punish somebody by just wiggling his ears? That's not a very big crime, to do that. So that put a problem for me. I went home to Fred Flemmer's where I was boarding, and for 2 weeks, every evening I sat in front of the mirror and worked on my ears so I could wiggle them at will. And then when I could wiggle them at will, each ear separate, and I thought it was ready now. Anytime when this comes up again in school, I'll be ready for it. Sure enough, here they're all laughing on school time, and it was about in this dull time in the afternoon, about 2:30 in there somewhere. That's a bad time in school, in grade school. Here they were all sitting and laughing. But I saw that big geography book up there, and so I sat back at my desk and I said, all right, put your books down. I want to talk to you a little bit. Reinhold put his book down and they all sat up, wonder what's going to happen now. I said, Reinhold has been entertaining you with wiggling his ears. I said, is that awful funny, is it? I noticed you all laughed, I said. But now look, I can wiggle this ear. I can wiggle this ear. Why don't you laugh? That was the end of that problem. No more did I have any problems with that. And then one day, Manuel Miller, that's your cousin, wasn't it? Manuel Miller. See those? You see now our ceilings are 8 feet high. I think this one is 8 feet now. That's standard, isn't it? 8 feet.
Yeah.
But when I stood like this, I could put my hand against the ceiling like this. It was only
No,
about
that's fine.
six feet or something like that. So Manuel Miller wrote his spelling words on the ceiling because that was the bedroom or was it the front room? It was papered. The room was papered, inside. So he wrote the spelling words on there. And then the first lesson we had after the opening exercises after dinner, we had the big spelling class. I had 3 spelling classes, the big one and the middle one and then the primary. And man, when I pronounced the words Manuel, he would scratch his head and he would look up there. He was a poor speller. He just had an awful time with spelling, Manuel. So I thought, how am I going to get ahead of that? Every time and the others were laughing, and I didn't know it then yet. Then I looked up there. Oh, yeah, I saw some writing on the ceiling. So I said, antelope. Manuel says, that wasn't in our spelling lesson today. I says, is that why you didn't write it up there? So that settled that one without any punishment.
Tell us about, what'd you say, high heels or?
Well, Clarence, I had problems with Clarence.
Mm-hmm.
Clarence was not a boy that would give you any trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But I had problems with him in school, and I didn't know why. And I asked the county superintendent about that. I said, he gets his lessons in just a short time, and then in school time he makes faces at others and he does this. I'll tell you what the problem is. Did you remember Bernstein?
Yeah, Leo Bernstein.
Leo Bernstein was the county superintendent, and he came to visit church school. And he says, I can tell you what the problem is. You have to load him down with work. He says he hasn't got anything to do, so he invents things to do. So Lydia and Tabitha, they always tried to outdo each other in dress. They were Tabitha was a little younger, but Lydia, they'd come to school with high-heeled shoes on. And on noontime, I was always out playing games with them. I'd go fox and geese and whatever it was, dare base we call it that time. Maybe you know what that is.
Yeah, we still
and
play that.
Lydia was out running with her high-heeled shoes and ripped them off, both heels. And she picked them up and laid them beside the schoolhouse. Clarence saw that, so he picked them up and he got some shoelace and so he tied them on his feet. When I rung the bell, in comes Clarence walking. But he walked in and then just about blew up the school, Clarence walking with high-heeled shoes, Lydia, he comes in without any heels on at all. So I happened to recognize it and I said, did you want to get taller, or how come you wanted to wear those high heels? Well, he didn't have a good answer, and I didn't know what else to ask, so there was no punishment or anything, but I gave him much more to do. He did twice as much as Lorino, Lydia, or those others, Manuel, and he always was done with his work. So that's
How many years did you teach?
three in church school.
Just 3 at church school?
3 in church.
But didn't you teach Dad at all?
No, he was not old enough when I was through here. I was already teaching country school out here, 31, and then you didn't go to school yet then. See,
What did you do after the 3 years here? You taught some.
See, I had 3 years church school, and then I went 1 year to Valley City Teachers College to get my teaching certificate for public school. And when I got teaching certificate, I applied and I got this school over here. They call it the Jungert School.
Mm.
And from then I put in 10 years in public school teaching.
When you lived with Grandma and Grandpa Miller, was there a lot of fruit and money for that kind of stuff, or was it strudel? What kind of food did you eat a lot of?
Oh, in the fall they bought a lot of grapes. They, I know they bought them by the lugs. I don't know, they weren't high priced, but in winter time I don't know. I was no particular about eating. I ate what was on the table, and then when I had sufficient, that was it.
Why are you laughing, Mary? You got a story?
Tell about when you and Reinhold went to sleep together. How he warned you.
Well, see, when I boarded at Fred Flemmer's, then John Miller's, they wanted to have that tuition taken off from, instead of paying it in to pay tuition, why take it off on the board, they figured so much board. But when I came here, they said, too bad, we can't have a private room for you. You have to sleep with our oldest son, share the room together with the oldest son. And teacher should have, that they figured should have a private room, Well, I wasn't that sophisticated. So when I went to bed in the evening, Reinhold Miller said to me, they always called me Mr. Hoffman. I never had allowed them to call me teacher. Not that I wanted the honor, but I wanted to train them when they talked to the neighbors, Mr. Eichele or Mr. Wentz, or I didn't want them to say Willie, Willie Wentz over here. I wanted them to be polite, So Mr. Hoffman, Reinhold says, you're going to have problems with me here at night, he said. He said, when I sleep once, I get all the covers, and I hang on, and you might wake up and have no covers, and I have them all. And I thought, well, if that's the case, I'm safe there, because I usually have my covers too. So about 1:30 at night, Reinhold was kneeling beside me and pulling, Mr. Hoffman, may I have some covers? The first night. I had my share and he didn't have any, so that was settled.
Now, when the Depression hit, when things got really bad, were you still in this area?
Yes, I was. I taught school. Let's see. Yeah, I was at Bend. See, I taught 1 year here at their school. That was in 31, and the Depression came, in the latter 30s. Then I taught 5 years, in Ben Miller's school. I boarded 4 years with Ben Miller's, and I remember helping John Miller seed in the spring when not that grain that I helped seed didn't even come up. 1936.
Yeah, it was so dry.
No, this grain what was seeded in 36 didn't even come up.
What year did Grandpa die?
Grandpa who?
Miller, John.
34.
34.
Was he sick long or just for about a year?
He had problems already when I boarded here. He had problems with, he always said, my Magen schafft nicht recht. My Magen schafft nicht recht. Well, he died of stomach cancer, But I know he always, certain things, he wouldn't eat certain things.
Was he a vegetarian? Didn't somebody tell me that?
Yeah, he was.
He didn't eat meat.
Was that for health, for a belief of his, or he just couldn't tolerate eating it?
Well, I don't know, but didn't Reinhold? No, Harold was the one that he wouldn't eat meat, but he'd eat wurst.
Yeah, he was young yet. But they kind of with this, the reformers there, they quit meat, and he never started, but he never got involved either with those.
Yeah, I know now.
But that part he just left off. He didn't eat meat.
Can you give me any impressions? This woman, what's her name? Rowan?
Rowan.
That was in that book, Nothing to Fear.
Rowan.
Is she mentioned in there?
Yeah, she was somewhat in with the reform movement, not exactly, but she had a movement of her own that resembled. Did you ever hear about her back here?
Oh, yes.
Or the reformers, or what? What did people sit around Sabbath afternoons and say? Is she right? Is she wrong? Or
Well,
or how did it? Was that a big hot issue or not much?
it was discussed she was a crook.
Mm-hmm.
She went to the Sister White, to the vault, you know, where Sister White's manuscripts are kept, and she wrote out that she was chosen by God in place of Sister White, and she slipped some of her papers forged papers into the vault. And I had the privilege of going to Cathay and hearing her preach.
This Rowan, really?
This Margaret
Rowan?
Margaret Rowan, yeah. I
Was she real dynamic, or?
Oh, she was quite the speaker, but what I never could, I can't say the word now, justify. She said that she had visions just like Sister White had, and was supposed to take Sister White's place, but she always had the exact visions that Mrs. White had, exactly the same. Now, if you have them exactly the same, you can get in mind here, wonder if she didn't copy that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that thought always came to me. I was in the Cathay Church when she spoke, and my dad was kind of interested in German we say war ein bisschen angesteckt. You understand that?
Yes.
In the Rowan movement.
Yeah. And so we drove with the team, it was 25 miles. We drove on Sabbath to Cathay to hear her preach. And she had a woman with her, and we had our team tied behind the church, and we took some feed along on Sabbath, some ground feed or something, and let our horses eat little feed. So they had to run the next 25 miles home after church. And when I came back at the church, and I don't know, was my sister with me or so, and there this woman, other woman, and Mrs. Rowan, they were putting lipstick on and
blush
and putting little rouge on their cheeks, and Fred Miller, your uncle, he was terribly against that, you know. He was just adamant, and of course your Uncle Jake too, you know, that they want to improve on God's creation, he said, you know. God created them perfect, and here they want to improve on that. So I saw them put the rouge and lipstick on, and I went and told that to my dad, and he says, das war nicht so. He couldn't believe that.
That wasn't so.
That wasn't so. But I saw it with my own eyes. But
for those days, that was pretty risque, wasn't it?
Well, since Mrs. Sister White was speaking about, well, self-adornment, you know, and here she was representing her now in her place, and she was doing it herself, so that didn't sound right.
Well, weren't they even eating, in privacy, weren't they even eating pork?
That I don't know.
Did you ever hear Ellen White speak?
No. I could have probably, but I was still, she died in 15 and I was 16 years old then, but I never had an opportunity to be anywhere. The closest I ever remember when she spoke, she was in Lincoln, Nebraska, and that was in 1909. After that, she didn't travel very much. You know, she died in California.
Well, this Margaret Rowan, her popularity, did that really fall out? She predicted the Lord would come in 1925 or something, February. Yeah. After that didn't happen, is that when her movement really died out?
No.
No, I don't think that.
What really, there was always people watching her very close. And so in California, somewheres, she was going to poison another preacher, and they found out about that, and when that came out, that spoiled her whole message, you know.
I can see why.
She was going to eliminate.
Attempted murder.
Yeah, she was. Yeah.
It said in that book that she staged her own death and resurrection. She pretended she died and resurrected herself.
That I don't remember that.
It says in that book, and said And she eventually committed suicide. That's what it said.
I think she did.
I was wondering that book, why was, now the doctor, Uncle Jake, is that Uncle Jake? How was he associated with her? They're
Well,
shown side by
See,
side
there
on a
was
poster.
there was this two men from Germany. I forget. I knew you used to know their names real well, and they went through this country here, and of course, Jake was a very dynamic speaker, you know, and they got him interested in seeing that he was a good speaker. They thought, well, there's somebody that can raise up their help them. Spunknebel and
Schwanknebel was one of
Spunknebel and
the other one started with D, and I just can't think of that name now.
They weren't Chinese, I guess.
no, they're German.
I know.
Germany. They were
Spunknebel.
Spunknebel. That's a real German.
Was he a doctor at this time? A medical doctor?
Your uncle?
Yeah. Or was he a doctor?
No, he was a.
They always called him Dr. Miller.
Yeah, well, he
was
Was that a PhD or what?
He was a very big evangelist at one time, but where he studied this naturopath. That was that.
Oh.
He was going to heal everything by nature, and I got to visiting with him one time over at Christ Kaiser's place.
Mm-hmm.
Christoph Kaiser, not
Was that Dave's father?
Dave's father. You know,
Uh-huh.
that's where what's his
Where
name?
Curtis lived.
Curtis lives now. There was Fred Flemmer was there.
Which
and-
Fred Flemmer, the Blair one?
Yeah.
There, yeah, Fred,
Not-
where I boarded at. We went over to see Jake Miller, and he was over there, and he had the floor. He was very,
Eloquent speaker.
oh yeah, he was a very good speaker, and he once, he was going to tell there one evening how even the Adventists, he says, they put lightning rods on their house. He says they want to tie God's hands. You know, how can they stop the lightning? He says they can't. They want to draw the lightning from the sky. He said, and then they think they can tie God's hand so he can't hit the house. So they put lightning rods. Our Adventist people, you know, he was against the Adventist people. You know, he was a reformer now. When he got all through, then I says, Mr. Miller, I want to tell you something. See, I was now recognized as a school teacher, you know. Fred Flemmer was there, Christoph Kaiser, you know. Then I said, I saw a demonstration in a laboratory where they put lightning rods on a house and another house where there was no lightning rods on, and then they had a machine that made lightning. And that lightning was just as powerful as lightning that comes from the clouds. And these lightning rods, they did not attract lightning to the house. They discharged the clouds so that there would be no spark between the clouds and the house. I said, and in German it has the right name. I said, and then they are Blitzableiter. See, not unlighter, but uplighter. They keep the lightning
Like a
from.
lightning
You probably know that from
Keep the lightning
from
away.
Yeah.
studying that in the
So what
laboratory.
was his answer?
When I got and I said, you can be sure that if the lightning rods are put up correct on the house, that house is not going to be struck by lightning. So when I got done, then he leaned over and then he said to Christ Kaiser, that's not wants to know something too. Der Rotzer will always listen.
I take it that he was kind of like his mother, outspoken.
Kind of
He was the
Oh,
He
yeah,
wanted to have the
he
floor.
was very much outspoken. Yeah.
he was a colorful character, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because after he changed over to
Reform.
a reformer, John Seibel, you know, he was a
A
very
pastor.
prominent Adventist in North Dakota. He raised up Gackle, helped raise up Streeter and Lair, and different churches, you know, and so John Seibel debated one time with Jacob Miller.
Was that a popular thing to have
Yes.
the great speakers get together and
Yeah,
kind of
well,
entertain
once in a
people.
while, you know, so
Yeah, debates.
Seibel said, and they, on all his experience as a preacher, he never had anyone as hard to deal with as Jake Miller.
Really?
Yeah.
So he wasn't a stupid man.
No, I should say no.
He was quite brown.
He was a quick thinker too. You see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember John Seibel saying that. You see, John Seibel, when he had a effort in Gackle, before they raised up the Gackle church, one of the preachers in Gackle challenged him to a debate.
Mm-hmm.
And so the evening came when they had the debate. And Seibel had always a big Bible with the covers on it. They were about that much wider than the Bible. And then the Bible was big and it was flabby. So when he held it, one side would hang over this side, the other would hang over that side.
Do you remember that?
Dad? It seems I do.
Well, he had that Bible, and then he'd hold that in his hand and he'd leaf through it. The leaves would hang
It's kind
down
of
this way.
dramatic. Huh?
Well, that's the way he had it. That was his Bible. And the other preacher, he went up on top of the platform, and he had a whole arm of books, encyclopedias and all, and he must have had about 10 or 15 books. And he got him on the pulpit, and he was supposed to speak first. What other church that was. I wasn't there, but there was some from Streeter that went. I think Gino's dad was there that evening when that happened. This Lutheran or evangelical or whatever he was, he gets up there and he says, "These Adventists, they remind me of a great big bull," he said, "with long horns," and he gets up on the railroad track and he hauls and the dust flies up and he blows his nose. You can just see the steam go out from his nose, and there comes a big passenger train with a big locomotive, you know, and he's standing on the track and he's going to stop that big locomotive, you know. He's going to stop that big locomotive, you know, this bull, you know. And he got all through, and then John Seibel gets up. And he says,
Was he Damien?
yeah, he was so.
very much
He
so.
says, I was so
Very.
interested in that story about that bull representing the Adventists trying to stop this great big train. He says, but ladies and gentlemen, brethren, he says, you have to admit that the bull had some sense, but the engine didn't have any sense. They all voted for John Seibel.
That's amazing. Tell me some stories of who's the guy that you always said, say that thing, Dad. That
Which I don't
you're
know.
barely 16 years old and not drive behind the
No.
ears. Go ahead.
Come.
Brother Oswald. Ben imitates him, so I kind of learned it too. You know Oswald.
Oh, yeah.
Amo Oswald.
Yeah. I was in the Gackle church once, and he preached at, and he must have preached it otherwise too. He said, "Meine Lieben, die junge Dame heutzutage, wenn sie kaum 16 Jahre alt ist, da muss sie einen Feller haben. Und dann fingen ihre Schwierigkeiten an."
Yeah, that's how he talked.
The translation is these young chicks, they're about barely 16 and drive behind the ears, and then they have to have a boyfriend. Is that the literal?
And then their
loose-
trouble started.
And then their trouble starts. Tell us some of the antics of those old preachers.
He did that just to get the people interested, and then he went right into it. So.
Who was the one in the book that they said he sat down on his behind and sat down? He went down on his behind on 6 steps, boom, 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 and got up and kept preaching, never stopped. Kind of was theatrical. He'd get some.
I don't remember.
Was it? Say the names of those old. Lair? Would that be the one?
I don't know.
I don't think it would be Larry.
Or-
Larry was very sincere man.
Schwint or it was one of the ones I hear about.
I think you're thinking of the Holy Rollers.
No. I'll go find it. somewhere, but
Is it in the
honey,
book?
go get me that book. It's in the box in the. There's a box in Mom's room right as you come on the chair. Yeah, it's in the book, but he's one that I heard about. Who were the big preachers here? Some of them were.
Was there something about a Malenko?
Meyer.
Michaelenko?
Michaelenko, yeah.
Yeah, that was in the book.
Well, Michaelenko, he was not such a dynamic speaker.
He came from the Russian.
Find it,
camp.
honey. Who were the two that really were instrumental in starting? Was that Seibel and who? The Streeter Church.
Well,
Thanks,
there was Lair.
Thank you.
There was Carl
It
Lair.
could have been Lair. Was Lair dynamic and kind of?
No, he was more of a sincere man. There was Carl Lair and his father Valentine, and then there was Hein, Hafner.
Okay. Okay, here's something I want to read to you. John Seibel, I don't know how to pronounce this word, indefatigable,
Yeah.
not able to be fatigued, German evangelist who literally devoted his life to the work of the Adventist Church in North Dakota, was one of its most colorful figures. Seibel's stories are common among current members of the churches in which he ministered. On one occasion, a member of the congregation to which he was speaking kept interrupting and distracting the evangelist. Now, you said Seibel was kind of passive. He wasn't a real
No, go ahead.
wild man. He handled it tactfully during the meeting, but afterwards confronted the man and reproved him. Then, putting down his books, coat, and hat, he explained he was putting all my religion over there and gave the heckler what he had coming. He squared off and punched him in the nose.
That's right. Yeah, he put his books all on a pile. That's where his religion was now.
He left it aside.
Yeah, he put his religion aside and he punched him. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, and here's the story about the bull and the locomotive that
Yeah.
you just said. But I'll try to find this other story. Now, and what year was the Streeter Church?
That was 1915 when that was built. I think they had been doing the same year. They had effort.
Yeah, that was the same year my grandpa snuck away to the effort meeting, and then he passed away in 15, but the church was started.
No, Mary, you were a charter member of the church, were you?
Yes, I can remember the dedication yet.
Uh-huh.
People all came with horses and buggy, and they were all on the south side of where the old church was on the south side. The horses were all tied up, and they would serve lunch to all the guests that came. The women, they baked lots of kuchen, in those little classrooms up in front. That's where the women cut up the kuchen, and the men would go out with great big dish pans heaped full with apple. They'd walk around, each one got apple, and then they came with the kuchen, and that's how everybody was fed.
Tell about the church services there. Were they the morning services, or did they have the all-day services?
Oh, they'd be all day service.
They had
all day.
morning,
and then they'd have
Sabbath school, and they had
lunch.
preaching service, and then they had had lunch outside.
What did the toddlers do? Like Jonathan, I can't imagine him sitting that still. Were they quieter in those days, or?
Well, they'd play around, run around with the other kids.
Outside,
while the
or?
people were eating, yeah.
No, but I mean during the meetings, during the long all-day meetings.
They sat with their parents.
Yeah.
But it seemed like in those days the toddlers
They had
weren't as restless.
Oh, yeah.
But did the non-Adventists, were they prejudiced in those days?
Well, years ago, there were a lot of non-Adventists, some of the neighbors around the church that would come to the church when we had special meetings. And
Well,
I
they didn't have
remember old
TV
Chris-
or radio, to
Yeah.
entertain them.
A debate was entertainment, you might say,
Yeah.
don't you think?
But Jonathan's age, could he be I wonder sometimes how those toddlers put up with all that. Okay, I'm looking for this example.
when they would have testimony meetings, and a lot of those old men from around the church there, they'd get up, old Christian Grants, he would get up and he would really have a testimony.
Oh, really?
That was really, nowadays you can't get anybody to come to church anymore.
Did the Reform movement, like on a Sabbath afternoon, what would be a typical topic of discussion? Was that a big, did all your uncles sit around and discuss whether or not we should go with the Reform, or if that was heresy, or what was the Reform movement exactly? Was it fanaticism and
Yes.
eating, or what?
They thought they had new light, and they defended this.
Like what was,
Vegetarianism was a big one.
Oh, yes.
that was considered really fanatical, huh? Did that sort of die out then, or?
Some were affected, and they never
They never
healed
came out of it.
They didn't heal.
No, never healed out.
They just fell away from the church, sort of. But then after this Rowan woman was uncovered for what she really was, did that really hurt the reform movement? They said she wasn't the reform movement, but they were tied together a lot of times. People would...
I heard say about Mrs. Rowan that she had a dream she should burn somebody's barn down up north, northern part of the state. Well, she called it a vision, and she actually burned the barn down. But she got off quite easy because she called it a vision and a religious connected thing.
I have a question of that. Did you always teach, or did you do some farming too, or?
Well, I quit teaching and I went to farming.
Oh.
So I farmed 40 years after that,
Oh.
till I retired. No, what his aunt, Fred Miller's wife, she was instrumental in really giving up teaching. She gave me the most cutting lecture that I ever got to how to teach, and she couldn't write, nor could she read, but she knew how to teach, you know. And I taught quite a number of years after that, but that bothered me all the time. Now, I could teach the kids, but I couldn't teach the old folks, you see. And I thought, I'm going to buy myself a farm, and then when I go to bed, I can sleep. It got to the point where I'd go to bed, when I was still, last few years I was teaching, I slept upstairs, and there was a big clock right below my bedroom, like that one there. I could hear it ticking, I could hear it strike at night. I could hear it strike 10, 11, 12, clear to morning till 5 o'clock. I heard every hour strike. You know, you don't sleep very good then. So I thought, I'll just buy myself a little farm. And
You could make it in those days by just farming, going out and buying a little farm.
Well, I bought 100 acres for $400. Was
$4?
That place where I'm living on, there was a windmill on there, there was a barn on there, and there was a little house. All we had to do is to go in, and it was just a 2-room house, you know, but that's where we started. 100 acres, $400.
Well, $400 would be equal to several $1,000s now, I suppose. But
Well, that would be 100 acres, that'd be $4 an acre. Now it's $200, $300 an acre, you know.
yeah.
So I kept adding a little year by year and made the farm larger. And I'd go to bed and set my alarm to get up at 5, and barely got to hit the pillow, hear the alarm goes off. I must not have set that right. I'd go and look, sure, that was 5 o'clock. See, you couldn't sleep that way in teaching, you know. Your mind was not resting. There you'd sleep.
Were you ever sorry that you did that?
No.
Never?
No.
Here's a story about that Mrs. Rowan. Let's see. She had something about, she had a picture of she and her mother. And when it was researched, they were both of her. One was dressed up to look young and one to look old. And she circulated the picture.
She was a deceiver.
She was a goofball the way it sounds, huh?
Deceiver.
You did until that story. Isn't there a story in there about when they took her to the train?
Yeah, your dad took her to the train.
Oh, I haven't told that story.
Or was that other one?
No, there was two ladies that came around to my dad's place, and my dad hauled them to a meeting place. One was Kennedy. Yeah, one was
Kennedy.
Kennedy. The other one was Fry.
Yeah, right.
Kennedy and Fry were their names, and he was kind of taken up with this reform movement. And he hauled them to the meeting, and when they came home, and then they were still discussing what they had preached about. They had preached about Jesus coming the 6th of February 1925.
Mm-hmm.
And so my dad sat there, and it was after the meeting, it was around maybe 10 o'clock. And he said, I want to ask you a question. You preached tonight. My dad was outspoken when he got to. You preached tonight that Jesus was coming the 25th or the 5th of February. This, how do you know that? He said. The Bible says, so you want to know more than the Bible does. If it wasn't 10 o'clock tonight, I would haul you away tonight yet. So he got up early in the morning and he hauled him to the train. He got him out of the house.
Your dad did this?
Huh?
Your dad did this?
Yeah,
To
he-
this Rowan woman?
No,
or
no,
to-
these were in favor
Followers
of Mrs.
of-
Rowan.
uh-huh,
There was
uh-huh.
Mrs. Kennedy and Mrs. Fry. They were going around the country preaching.
Those were the ones that were eating pork in the secret.
Well, maybe so.
Yeah,
I didn't
those were
say.
the
See,
ones
I
that
was
were-
not at home at that time. I was in Hutchinson in school then when that happened. But he told me this. He said, I told them, they know more than Jesus does. But Jesus says,
Doesn't
even
know
the
the
Son
time.
doesn't know. Only my Father in heaven knows when he's coming. And now you want to know.
They've got the verse in here on her poster where she and Dr. Miller are together. It says, surely the Lord God will do nothing, but he revealeth his secrets unto his servants, the prophets. And that was their big thrust, apparently. That's interesting. Did people leave the church in the same, like teenagers? Did they go out of the church like they do today, or did people kind of come in and stay in? They say now for every 2 baptisms, 1 person goes out. Every 2 that come in, 1 goes out.
During that time, I don't think that was that bad. I can't think of it that bad. I remember those that were baptized, they stayed in the church.
Because that was a big step maybe they didn't
Not
take.
usually. Do you think of the Kaisers and some of those?
They weren't baptized members.
No, no.
Well, I think young people at those years, they didn't have the privilege, or like they do now, they didn't drive cars, they were just home. If they went anywhere, so it would have to be on horseback or walk.
Uh-huh.
They just didn't get out into the world like these young people do nowadays.
Yeah.
So they stayed more around their home and in their church.
Which president of the United States stood out? Were there any back then that were particularly good or bad? I mean, did you have any Nixons that were pretty corrupt or any?
The one that
What was the political climate like after
closed
the
banks.
well,
Russian.
after the Depression? Were people kind of leery of the politicians and didn't believe them, or were they kind of hoping somebody put a chicken in every pot again?
Thinking back to my teenage years and the first up to 20 years of age, I was much interested in politics. The first that I remember that really that I began to think anything is when we had a governor in North Dakota by the name of William Langer.
I remember hearing
William Langer.
Wild Bill.
Wild Bill Langer, yes. Well, I went to a political speech one evening, and Bill Langer was speaking. Because he was speaking, so I think I was teaching school already at that time, so I was in the 20s. And I came to the schoolhouse, and this is the first story he told to get the people's attention. He says, you know, when I was in Sykeston, I was over to Mrs. Joe Labor's house. Well, these are real people, these Labors. He said, and policeman came into the door, and Mrs. Labor was ironing. She's standing ironing on the ironing board. And the policeman said, I brought Joe home. I brought Joe home. She says, just bring him in here and put him on the cot. He was drunk, and bring him in and put him on the cot. And everybody laughed, you know. He got the crowd all into
And he's told about these real people.
Yeah, he used real names. Everybody knew them.
Well, sure.
What was the deal with him? Wasn't he controversial? Didn't he kind of have a little
Well, sure.
scandal of some kind
Well,
against him? Or I don't know what it was.
He was very controversial, and he was very bold. See, like now the farmers have problems, you know, and they can't pay their bills. He went to work, and a lot of farmers, bankers didn't dare to foreclose on them because he was governor of North Dakota. He wouldn't allow that. So after he was elected senator from North Dakota in the Congress, you know, then the other congressmen or the other senators, they have to have a meeting to seat the new, that he has the privilege of sitting there and being a senator with the rest of them.
Uh-huh.
So one feller gets up and he says, I make the motion, or I move, that we have no meeting to seating the Langer, because if the people voted him in North Dakota, who are we that we are going to deny him a seat here in the Senate? So they didn't have even voted on it, because people voted him in.
He was so
and
automatically.
He was the senator for North Dakota. And he used that expression. He said even they recognized him in Washington that he was an honest man, and he was as crooked as could be.
Well, he was a lawyer too, and this girl in Hazelton shot her father, 17-year-old girl, and he got her off scot-free. She was sharp enough to do it.
That's really not what I'm trying to say. Is that's where I first began to pay any attention to the general. And one of the first things I know about Washington D.C. is when McKinley was shot, and Roosevelt was vice president, and Roosevelt took his place. And my dad came home. There was no radio, nothing. My dad came home from town, and he said, just like you, he would come home from town. Well, hi Thompson and President McKinley erschossen. You see, well, that's all we knew. I remember when he came home from town and said McKinley was shot well, he was visiting in a certain town. It was not in Washington where he was shot. I don't know. Was it in Michigan?
I don't know.
I just heard it the other day.
I can't remember where he was shot.
But-
I know it was at a train depot, but I can't remember where
it was not in Washington D.C.
It didn't have nearly the impact like when Kennedy was shot.
No.
Or the media wasn't around. Of all the changes you've seen taking place, because in the last 100 years, does anything surprise you anymore?
Well,
I mean, for a while there, weren't you just overwhelmed when you saw TV? Wasn't that
well, I know
a complete surprise?
that was a surprise that I could go in a drugstore and then they'd turn a button there and then they could hear Winnipeg. I remember that in Harvey, where you could even hear Winnipeg, people talking from Winnipeg. Well, that was absolutely new to me. And my dad wanted to get a good radio, and he took and loaded up a load of wheat and with a team of horses, and he hauled it to town, and he told the man at the where they sold TV or radios, here's the check for a load of wheat, and if you can give me a radio for that, then I'll buy a radio for it. If you want more, then I don't buy one. So he took the check, and Dad came home with the radio.
Pretty simple, huh?
Was that a real...
Well, that was in about
Advanced?
1925 when the radios were just coming out.
Do you remember when electricity...
No.
started
that's,
up?
No, that's too far back. I didn't.
Did
live
you
in
always have that?
1876.
But did you always have it on your farms and everything?
No, we.
I mean, do you remember when you first... You remember... Was it always there?
When we
Buffalo.
farmed where we are now, we carried the lantern in the barn and milked. Had kerosene lamp in the barn and milk. We had no electricity at all. We have kerosene light, and where we're living now, and we started 45 years
You
ago.
still had kerosene light.
But do you remember the first day when you were hooked up and you...
Well,
Flip the switch?
That, yes.
in May of 1951 is when the rural electric.
That long?
52 is when we got it in our
We got
yard.
it in 51.
We got May and in June we got married.
Just in
We
time.
got it in May.
That must have changed your lives
All day,
completely.
the fridge and the
Or didn't it that much?
phonograph.
We rushed to town, bought a deep freeze and a refrigerator.
No, fridge
A
and a
refrigerator.
phonograph.
Because there's no way you could afford with that 32 volt.
You had a 32 volt?
Yeah,
there?
we did.
Yeah, we had a
But
32
the
volt.
batteries were always dead running that fridge. You couldn't do it.
So you brought electric fridges and things? Then you thought you were in heaven, huh?
That was great.
I remember
Had a
that.
phonograph,
Cabs
we could
to
have
town.
it.
A phonograph? Now, the 50s were pretty good financially. The economic picture was a little better, wasn't it?
Yes, it
He had
was.
recovered from the dirty
51
30s.
was a big crowd.
Tell
Yeah.
Adam where he was shot.
Well, McKinley was shot in Buffalo, it says here,
New York, yeah, that's right.
by Leon
See, that's close to the Niagara Falls, there
Sologos.
across there.
Sologos.
Yeah, but
I heard somebody say the other day, you go through all the presidents, they each have something they're known for. McKinley, the only thing you know about him is he was shot. Nobody knows anything about him. That's it.
My president book from when I taught school.
You know, when you go to Medora, this must be old. Truman's the last president. When you go-
my favorite one that I can think of is Eisenhower. There was many things said about Eisenhower since he died, or that I always admire him for that.
Personal picture of him, Dad.
When he was still living on the farm there at Gettysburg, he had a farm close by. Donnie took us to this Gettysburg battlefield, and then we climbed the tower. I think the tower was about 30 feet high. When we were on that tower, and he pointed out that's Eisenhower's farm over there. He was still living at that time. See, when Don was in the army in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. You know, they make such a big deal about Teddy Roosevelt having visited here. Did any North Dakotans know that he had been here?
Oh, yes.
I mean, was that a big deal at the time, or has that since been a tourist thing?
No. He had a ranch, you know, at
Yeah.
Medora, and there were some people from the New Home country that were neighbors to him out there, and they had problems with them when he tried to round up cattle that belonged to them, and they had arguments with him. She said the Roosevelt was a lot of Easterman. That's the way she put it, that lady. He wanted to get our. He was on horseback, and when he rode around, he was going to round up cattle that didn't belong to him.
Did you have a problem when you taught school with the German language? Was there any English at all talked at home?
Well,
How could those kids know English enough to study it and stuff?
now which you mean?
When
I
you
was
taught
teaching?
here, yeah.
Well, yes. When I was teaching up here, they got the idea that if they talked German on the school ground, I wouldn't understand it. See, there was Eicheles. Eichele married Louise, didn't he?
Yeah.
Craig.
And then they had 9 kids coming on the same vehicle to school, and Ella Eichele, I think it was Ella.
Really?
She was the same age as Esther Weiss, that's married to
J.K.
Fleming.
no, not or this
Craig, Millie.
Millie.
Yeah, Millie.
They were the same age.
Uh-huh.
Then I think Millie was in on it. Wenn jetzt versteht, hat nicht so sagen. You know, I heard that.
Uh-huh.
Oh. So they were on the playground, you know. So one day I rung the bell and noontime, and they all took their seats. I had 36 kids, I think, that
wow.
year in school. And then I talked to them and I said, do you know that I was hired here by your folks? They pay taxes, and the school board, they hires me and they pay me money, that I'm supposed to teach you how to write and how to read and geography and all these different subjects, you see. I'm paid to do that for you. And so that's why I'm trying to help you. And I heard here on the school ground that I tell you that you're supposed to talk English, and you don't listen to me. You talk German most of the time. Now, don't think 1 minute that I don't understand it, I said. I understand every word you say. And then I switched over and I talked German to them, giving them a German lecture there on school time. I had no more problems after that, because then they knew I understood it. You see, there was about 4 kids from Henry Miller's place, and there was 4 of them or 5 from Younger's here. But I had a big bunch over there.
Yeah.
Well,
30s.
when they found out that that I could speak the German,
And it wasn't fun
then
anymore.
it wasn't so funny anymore. So
I remember when Mike Rao called Mrs. Whelan a kvetch. He had to write "you prune" 500 times. You prune, you prune.
and she understood it, huh?
She didn't, but somebody must have interpreted for her. She remembered the word and went home and asked somebody.
Could you find that statement?
I can't find that. Now, who would it have been? It's somebody whose name I had heard. They said this guy would hit the pulpit or just keep on preaching.
I've got it marked in mine. I remember that too, but
Good.
really is the book.
Well, it has a book. I can't find it. It was one of the names that I heard, like
Wrote something.
Cybele Lair and some of those.
Pages,
Well, if you find it, you call us tonight or two.
I do
Yeah.
too.
Hi, sweetheart.
No, he's all rested.
Look at honey. Look who's on the TV.
See, you're on TV. What time is it?
Adam and Mary.
Can you go sit between them a little bit so you can be on TV?
He's got things in his own mind.
Jonathan, come here. I'll tell you a secret.
I just can't find this. I don't know where in the world I'd look even. But did you give a lot of these facts
Huh?
to DuPuy?
He got a lot of them from me.
What, did he just use a tape recorder and interview you?
Well,
Or
he
what?
used
No, I
tape.
interviewed.
We sat one afternoon just like this. He asked questions and he was getting it ever on tape.
He was.
And I'm a scrapbook lady. I
In the
cut
bottom.
out a lot of
in
things
the
from the
bottom,
review,
in the
from
bottom.
the.
Oh, is that where a lot of those came
And
from?
they have them all in the book. And when I brought them out and showed it to him, had a lot of, write-ups about different Camrys and things. And he said,
Uh-huh.
could I take those along? I had 2 big ones. Yeah, I said, but I want them back someday. So he took them along, and I think he took out a lot of things out of there. And then when he, once when he said that he wasn't sure whether he was going to write that book, and I was worried if I was ever going to get my scrapbooks back. Sure enough, one day he came and brought them.
Oh, there was something in here too about the Ku Klux Klan. Where was that? Protected them one night. And I can't see where the Vela City. Well, sometime I'll find that and then I'll have to call you. Schwint. Was he? It says he was quite emotional. Was he the one?
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Would Schwint have done something like that?
Yeah, Schwenk maybe.
That's Kidsmith's.
Okay, listen to this. Schwint preaching on Sodom and Gomorrah sensed he was losing the congregation and decided to illustrate the total destruction of the cities. Still preaching at full speed, he started down the steps of the platform, slipped, fell, and bounced one step at a time on his posterior to the bottom of the 6-foot stage, preaching all the time. He picked himself up and kept right on preaching, grabbed a chair, smashed it totally, and started back up the stairs. He stumbled again, virtually crawled up on his hands and knees, but never stopped preaching.
That could be him.
Now, did you ever hear Schwint preach?
Oh, yes, many times.
Would this seem like something he'd pulled,
Yeah,
maybe?
that could be.
Said he often had tears. Uncle Sam Riley was pretty
Well,
lively.
that Schmidt, he could cry anytime he wanted.
Yeah, he could.
Yeah, it said he kind of turned on his tears. Said it was highly emotional on the style of
Yeah.
John Cybele. Tears during his sermons moved the hearts of his believers. To this day, they were convinced that the tears were an outpouring. Oh, let's see. Many have learned that Schwint frequently indicated in the margins of his sermon notes the appropriate point to let the tears flow. Let tears flow at this point. That is so funny.
Did you ever read that story in there? Where are the dead?
That's
No.
not in this one.
I don't remember anything like that.
These 50 golden years.
Oh, that's in the 50 golden years.
What? Tell the story.
If you ever
we
get
know
a chance to buy a book,
We know the man personally.
but if you buy a book in a book and Bible house, it's called
It's
these 50 golden years.
If you ever get a hold of that,
Really?
Yes.
it's interesting.
There's where these new beginning preachers
You would know a
experiences.
lot of those preachers in there.
Is it from the Dakota area?
Some are from
Yeah.
Dakota, some
Uh-huh.
are all over the United States. But I think Mrs. She writes once a month. She writes in the review. Miriam Wood,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
uh-huh.
story.
Yeah. Yeah.
and this man, he's a member of the Calamasa Church where Donnie goes to church.
Uh-huh.
His name is Miller Brockett.
I've heard of that.
Miller Brockett. He had a series of meetings in the town,
Later tonight.
but he could not get any hall of any kind. So he got the funeral parlor. Funeral parlor, and it was nice. And he could preach there, and he had meetings. And then the one in charge said, and if ever should have any problem with the lights, behind this door here, around the corner, you'll find the breakers in there, or is the fuse box or anything, and then you go. So one evening when they're preaching, and all of a sudden the lights went out, and his subject was, "Where are the dead?"
Is this a true story?
That's a true story.
Yeah.
I talked with the man.
Yeah, we
Miller
know the man.
Brockett personally. So he went. The lights went out. Through that door he went to get the switch. And when he turned the lights on, then he knew where the dead were.
There was dead bodies in
Not
there.
bodies on the tables, that you put.
Where are the dead?
Where are the dead?
Oh. There's a lot of good stories like that. If they weren't written down, they'll be lost throughout the ages.
Well,
I thought this book was
that book
excellent.
is there's a story in there in that book. I went to Linton, and Schwint was preaching there, and his tent master was Reinhold Beats. And in the evening, during the meeting, pump, pump, pump on the tent. They were throwing rocks at the tent from the town, people from the town. And Reinhold Beats run out the tent. And Schwint was preaching. My mother crawled under the bench, the rock could come through. I didn't. I was listening to hearing the rocks fall, And Reinhold Beats caught one of the boys. He brought him in and put a chair beside the pulpit, and he had to stay there and sit there until the meeting was over. And after the meeting, they questioned him, and they said it was one of the preachers in town, took a pickup, and they went out in the country and loaded up a lot of rocks, and he drove up there to the tent, and he said, "Now boys, go to it." And that's in that book, that
Yeah.
50 gold
51
meters.
Oh. There's stories kind of like that here where the Ku Klux Klan
Oh,
protected the Adventists from
I don't remember.
harm that one night.
There's a lot of interesting stories about Reinhold Beats in that book.
I'll have to.
When they were in Bismarck having meetings, they lived in the basement that was infested with rats. And Martha was deathly scared of rats. They had holes in the floor when the rats came in. And during the night, when they were sleeping, the rats would come in and come up, I think right up into the bed.
Oh.
And Martha, she just screamed all she could because she was so scared. So Reinhold went to work and he plastered all those rat holes shut. That's the end of the rats in their room. There's a lot of interesting stories in the Bible. 50 golden years. You can
I'll
still
have to
buy
get
it, I
that,
think, on
Jonathan.
the
I'm sure you
It
can.
was $9.
But I think it's
$9 one time, and I went in the Book and Bible House in California. I want to buy it. No, I said, I know. First thing you know, it was $1.95.
95 cents.
$1.95. So
What did they put it down from hardcover
I
to
don't know.
soft
They didn't
cover,
have-
maybe?
I no, it was not hardcover.
Yeah,
But
that one is hardcover, what we have.
No, cover like that. And so I went.
Here, Jonathan,
I
put
went
this
and
away.
bought one.
That's what that book is.
Definitely. I'd enjoy hearing it. Well, let's wind this up and we'll see what we got in here. Sure, thank you for reminiscing on film here for me. A lot of good stories. Hey, there's an empty box.
That's why I wanted the jar back.
Here's another empty one.
That's a cheap deal. Honey, go stand by Adam and tell that Mama got an empty box of raisins. No. Stand right there.
Yes, Jeff. What did you get here now?
Did
you got-
Mom?
Well, sure, there's you on there.
Are they all empty?
No.
Cheap
The top
deal,
one.
huge.
Oh, that's all
Okay,
you.
well-
He gave me his box back and it was in perfect condition.